Welcome to Season 2 of the Cryptopulse podcast, your ultimate guide to the world of crypto, Bitcoin, and world economics. We're here to guide you through the crypto universe with thought-provoking topics, in-depth knowledge, and information to help you make informed decisions. We'll also be interviewing some of the best minds in the industry, such as CEOs of crypto projects, traders, economists, authors, and development teams from around the globe. And now for the episode.
Hello and welcome back to the Cryptopulse podcast for a very special episode where we explore what is Web3, and it's a question I get asked a lot.
Yeah, so I think when we're talking about Web3, we first of all need to look probably at the history of the internet. Now, Web3 feels like one of those buzzwords that you often see in crypto news coverage or project websites. And to the new and fresh-faced crypto users that enter the space, it's actually quite hard to understand what it really is. So to truly understand the difference between Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3, we have to start at the beginning of the computer in the 1950s.
Beep, boop, beep, boop, boop. Right, so we've got no budget for sound effects. I'm having to do them
It's a bear market budgets.
bear market budget bops and beeps. It's just, so before we go into the history of the internet, do you remember in like 2017, 2018, everybody was calling their business a blockchain business? They're like, oh, we're going to use blockchain. And everyone's like, oh, great. And before that, like it was, oh, we're a .com business and, you know, we're worth loads of money. Now it's Web3's kind of got that similar ring to it, but I think it's got some real fundamentals. So anyway, let's go back in time to 1950 to start with.
Yes, so as computer systems were being developed throughout the 50s and 60s, initial concepts of wide area networking started popping up in research papers at several computer science laboratories in the United States, United Kingdom, and France. But nothing concrete was ever created until the 60s. In 1969, the same year man first stepped on the moon, a man by the name of Leonard Kleinrock led a team of computer sciences at ARPA, Advanced Research Projects Agencies, to create a fundamental network system onto which the modern web was to be created and based on. The network was called ARPANET. Doesn't have the same ring to it, does it?
They're going to create ARPANET.
It sounds like something from a horrific sci-fi movie.
A real budget, bear market budget sci-fi movie.
But ARPANET was first conceived of and worked on in 1966, funded by ARPA with excess funds from a ballistic missile program.
Ooh, okay. So 4 network nodes were set up between UCLA, Stanford, University of California, Santa Barbara, and the University of Utah School of Computing. The first successful host-to-host connection on the ARPANET between Stanford and UCLA was made on the 29th of October, 1969. Both parties were on the phone to each other at the time to make sure that they were receiving messages. That happens today sometimes, actually.
Yeah. A call to say, did you receive my text message? Yes, I received your text message. Thank you.
You pretty much did that this week.
I did. Yeah.
The team at UCLA typed the command login, which made the computer at Stanford almost immediately crash. Must have been running Windows.
Yeah.
The only letter Stanford received was L-O. They tried again for an hour of tinkering and successfully logged in, but the first message sent over the internet ever was L-O, low.
Almost lol.
Yeah. Nearly lol. Didn't have enough power for that.
That's brilliant. So it was actually 3 years after then the project started at ARPANET. So 1966. It was 3 years later in 1969 when the first message was sent, which is quite a staggering amount of time, really. But the term internet was actually only coined in 1974 when 2 computer scientists published a research paper in which they were developing a language for all developing networks from lots of different research facilities to communicate with each other. Inter-network communication was abbreviated to internetworking, which was then abbreviated again to the internet. Commercial internet service providers, or ISPs, began to emerge in the very late 1980s, and the average speed of a connection at the time was about 56 kilobytes per second. And it was in this era that Web 1 was born.
Oh, did you use Web 1 ever?
I don't know. I don't know if I ever did. I mean, is sort of like the old modems classified as Web 1?
Yeah.
They're sort of like
Yeah, I had
AOL,
dial-up.
internet on a disc.
Yeah, I used some cranky old stuff. Something that people don't know, actually. I nearly studied information technology at university, but then I decided that the academic system was not for me. Putting it very politely,
and rigged,
flawed.
and
I was going to say it was a pile of piss, but there we go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, same thing. I did actually use the Web 1 system then. I mean, I remember those old modems that used to sort of make that that sort of noise before you'd log in, and you'd have to put your AOL disk into the drawer to get the thing fired up. And I actually remember getting speeds of probably around 10 or 20 kilobytes per second when downloading stuff, which is mind-boggling.
That 3 megabyte image only took
3 hours,
3 or 4 minutes. So what is Web 1.0 or Web 1? So Web 1 refers to the first version of the web that was available to the public. So think about those modem connections and all the screeching sounds that we've just discussed. Berners-Lee, the inventor of HTTP, which is hypertext
transfer protocol.
Well done.
Yeah.
Which is the protocol which all modern websites are still built on. Basically, Web 1 was considered a read-only web. In other words, Web 1 allowed us to search for information and read that information. There was incredibly little user interaction or content creation like we have now. It was essentially a digitalized dictionary, an encyclopedia, which I quite like that explanation. There were no advertisements on Web 1. The internet was still seen as a research tool, and at the time, commercial laws around such tools were ambiguous at best. When internet speeds increased and more households started buying personal computers for their homes, the web started to become a more social place. And that's where Web 2 steps in.
Yeah, now there's a really interesting interview that took place in 1995 on the David Letterman show, and it was Bill Gates who had been brought on to talk about the internet. Now, at the time, Bill Gates was obviously right at the cutting edge of technology. Windows had started to boom, and I think Windows 95 had just been released, so he was doing his media tour to talk about it. And to lots of people back then, I would say probably 95% of the population genuinely thought the internet was a joke. I mean, they sort of heard about this digital mail system or email and thought that it was absolutely hilarious that these nerds were logging onto their computers and using it for sending messages around the place. And I remember distinctly watching that episode, and I would urge any of our listeners to go and check it out. But the audience are actually laughing at Bill. They're laughing at Bill when he's talking about how the internet will revolutionize our access to information.
A couple of months ago, there was like a big breakthrough announcement that on the internet or on some computer deal, they were going to broadcast a baseball game. You could listen to a baseball game on your computer. And I just thought to myself, does radio ring a bell?
I always think back to that episode when I'm thinking about crypto and Web3 because, I think the late majority are still yet to join the party. And if people are laughing now, they probably won't in a few years. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I do. I have seen that clip. It is on YouTube. We'll actually try and dig out the link and pop it in the show notes for anybody that wants to check that out.
Yeah.
So never underestimate Bill Gates.
No, absolutely never do. But on from Web 1 into Web 2. So the question, what is Web 2? Well, it refers to the web as we see it today, or to grab another term from Berners-Lee, the read-write web. And what sets Web 2 apart from Web 1 is the ability to contribute content and interact with other web users. So Web 2 saw the boom of social media, the rise of YouTube, the popularization of chat forums, and the start of web browser technology such as JavaScript, which enable games, animations, and interactive experiences to be hosted online. So if most of the internet is Web 2, it does beg the question, what is Web 3?
I mean, Web 2, firstly, has just completely revolutionized the way that people interact as humans. And I don't think we can underestimate the power of that and what's been built on top of that, whether it's having food delivered, whether it's ordering your transport to your door, whether it's communicating with your friends and family, whether it's creating content and opinion pieces and videos. Most of the information all of the information we receive really comes over the internet now and through Web 2 platforms. And I don't think anybody at the start of this could have even imagined what we were able to do now. So I think we really do need to bear that in mind when it comes to Web3.
Yeah, absolutely. To unpack the question, what is Web3? Well, by extrapolating Tim Berners-Lee's various explanations of Web 1 and 2, Web3 can be thought of as the read, write, execute web. So this is a little bit of an abstract concept to visualize, but Web3 is still being added to as we speak, and it will take time for it to reach its full potential. But in short, this read, write, execute web is moving users away from centralized platforms like Facebook, Google, or Twitter, and towards decentralized models, and in some cases, nearly anonymous platforms. So Tim Berners-Lee also envisioned machine learning and AI being quite prevalent in this semantic web, and this reinforced by guests that we've interviewed in the past, seeing a rising trend in projects using AI and machine learning.
We did an episode on that a few years ago, didn't we?
We did. Yeah, we did. We've had some brilliant guests on that. Yeah, machine learning. Yeah, we've had some brilliant guests on talking about this stuff actually, and I think we still probably take AI and machine learning for granted. I think we are absolutely getting closer to that point where AI becomes so sophisticated that it will start to be able to improve itself, because at the moment most AI requires human intervention to create better iterations. But I think as soon as we get to that point where AI and machine learning can work on itself to improve its own systems, I think that's both incredibly exciting and terrifying all at the same time. But I think we're getting there.
So some prevalent versions of Web3 include better semantics, so machines can decode meaning and emotions from user text, which is pretty cool. So that uses AI to remove bots and bad actors effectively, and the use of VR and of course metaverse technologies to blur the line between the physical and the digital reality. The new internet will provide a more personal and customized browsing experience, a smarter and more human-like search assistant, and other decentralized benefits that are hoped will establish a more equitable web. Knowing all of this, a common question arises: why do crypto, DeFi, and blockchain communities talk about Web3 more than any other community or sector? Which I think is a very, very important question to answer. So one theory is that Web3's vision of democracy, decentralization, and owning the rights to your data has aligned perfectly with the values of DeFi, NFTs, and DAOs, and of course, Bitcoin. The innovation of Web 1 was spurred on by the USA feeling left behind by the Russians in the technology department, and the innovation of Web 2 was accelerated from a need to connect with one another and to share one's experiences with the world. And now Web 3 innovation is being furthered daily by public realization that huge corporations are making billions by selling their data, and the public want an alternative. Not to mention the huge data leaks that we've seen, which can have catastrophic consequences for some people in some countries.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about this on the show many times. In fact, we did a whole episode talking about the Cambridge Analytica Facebook data hack a couple of years ago. And it's becoming dangerous because not only is leaked data an infringement on personal privacy, it's also, in some areas, a threat to democracy and a threat to national security. I was talking to a friend this week who works inside the National Health Service here in the UK, who has just said that all doctors, nurses, it's not being widely televised, but it is public information, but the NHS has suffered such a catastrophic data hack that doctors and nurses now in hospitals can't actually access digital healthcare information for their patients. So they're having to request physical paper copies, and they expect the systems to be down for the next 3 months. And
Gosh,
of course,
I didn't know that.
yeah, it's quite a big thing that's happening here in the UK, which of course is adding pressure to an already very stressed healthcare system. But I mean, the point in that is that this is a system which is built with a single point of failure, and decentralization and Web3 would move that into a distributed system, which becomes incredibly difficult to hack, no matter how sophisticated you are. I'm sure the NHS are not, I'm sure they haven't just got one server somewhere, but I'm sure it's
You say that.
I know. Yeah, I actually take that back. They probably
I'm
have.
sure they don't, but they're probably using one of the big cloud providers and have some sort of special arrangement with them, I would imagine.
Yeah, like EMC, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
But what I really like, I love the example of medical records, because above all, someone's medical records are their records. They should be completely private, and that information should be sovereign to them. So in other words, we should be able to give permission for any healthcare service, any government department to view those records at any point. I don't think from an ethical standpoint, they should just be there in for anybody in that organization to view. Not anybody, obviously you need special permissions, but and then I've had a situation like with dentist records where things have been lost through the years because they've moved around and that. And I think to have an app with your a decentralized app with your data, your dental records, your medical records, all on there, where you own the private keys, and maybe there's some way that there could be biometric access to that, so you're not worried about losing your entire medical records because you've lost your private keys and you can't restore your wallet. But some kind of like decentralized biometric stored data, which is the key to unlock your medical records, seems like the most obvious thing in the world. And I know there's been a few projects that have tried to do something like that. I think what we're going to see is governments think, oh, this will be a good idea. Let's roll this out. Let's roll this out with our digital CBDCs. And if you take part in the CBDC stuff, then you get access to your digital wallet, rather than them allowing private organizations to innovate and deal directly with the end users. So it could be, I say, fixed easily. There's technology now that could do this. So that I think is a really important example of Web3. And there's some countries that people's medical statuses are discriminated against and could put them at risk from human rights perspective. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. I also think that, just to sort of extend on that point, that when you look at the hack that's just happened within the NHS, that information can be used maliciously, where you're talking about how certain conditions might impact on human rights. There are certain conditions which might be seen as by a sort of a totalitarian government regime, that might be seen as something that is undesirable. So yeah, I completely agree. I think healthcare is a great space to be revolutionized with decentralized Web3. Nobody has made any meaningful progress with it yet. We talked about Patientory, who was one of the projects having my old favorite that had a go at it a couple of years ago, but I don't think they quite pulled it off. But hey, here's hoping.
Well, the American system, the US system is very different, because obviously you've got that there's no social healthcare system. So the idea of keeping your own medical records is probably even more convenient and important, because you may use different hospitals and different doctors, so rather than a centralized system. But I just hate the idea of people's private information being stored on centralized servers. But I mean, that is literally the problem for the entire world now, isn't it? I mean, there's so much data about us individuals out there that the cat's out of the bag now, really. But I think we can strive towards this Web3 model. So I'm excited to see what gets built.
Yeah, me too. I'd like to just touch on something else that I was listening to recently, because I think that this is it's an interesting one to talk about, and it was the Mark Zuckerberg interview with Joe Rogan on the weekend. A really great podcast. It was about 2.5 hours long. But Mark is just about to release Quest 3, which is their sort of in-house VR metaverse project. And he was on there talking about how augmented reality and virtual reality will change the way that we interact with the internet and interact across space and time. And he was talking about the psychology of it and the kind of the interesting points that they found. And he was really, really big on how actually Web3, metaverse, and VR technology is going to be great for reducing carbon emissions globally. That was his kind of big thing. He was talking about how people that historically might have needed to travel to do, board meetings or travel into the office to feel that they were with colleagues. Actually, this could be a really good, meaningful replacement for distributed teams that kind of work all over the world. So I know we give metaverse technology sometimes a bit of a bad rep because it feels, a little bit like that movie Ready Player One, where people are just jacked in from morning till night. But actually, I think there probably are some positive applications for this technology. And he made the point that what typically happens with technology like this is that there will be applications for that tech that work really, really well, and applications that you think might work well that don't. And he used the example of martial arts. He said, we've built a couple of martial arts training systems in our Quest headsets, and what we found is that boxing worked really well. You could train, you could do boxing training, but unfortunately jiu-jitsu didn't work very well, because in jiu-jitsu you need a person standing opposite you who's kind of pushing against you, and you need that kind of more tactile interaction. So he said, across the board there will be things that this will improve, but he certainly doesn't see a future where people are waking up in the morning, putting their headset on and sitting there all day. But
yeah. I listened to the interview too. I thought it was really good. And I thought Zucks came across a lot better.
He did, yeah.
I thought Rogan gave him an easier time than he does with other guests.
What would you think?
But I think, having said that, I thought he was a bit more gentle. But having said that, Zucks gets roasted everywhere he goes.
He does,
so maybe Rogan was trying to actually get to the bottom of things and using a different... I mean, he's a great interviewer.
He's brilliant.
But I was really enthused by it. So my thoughts were that, if you could have virtual VR style meetings and they could replace staring at a Zoom screen, and Zoom's fine, but I can't remember whether it was Joe Rogan or Mark Zuckerberg that made this point, but they said that when they have meetings, every Zoom meeting sort of merges into one, and they don't always remember stuff.
Yes, that was Mark.
Because when you meet with somebody, the way that we communicate, over
spatially.
half of our communications is spatially and body language, and also what's in the room and how did I get there, and what other experiences have I had in the environment. So I think that will be really good. I love the idea of having higher efficiency. I love the idea of the reduction of commuting, so people don't have to spend 2 hours a day in a car or get on a train and go into a city, and they can spend more time on their health and wellness or with their friends and family. I think that's amazing, but I do want that to be my choice. I don't want to be told that I can't travel or drive because I'm using too much CO2 and I have a CO2 quota, and that's it, and I have to use this technology. So I think that there's lots of benefits, but like with any technology, it needs to be well thought out and used. This is sort of my new saying now. I don't know if you've heard it, but I look at technology as like a really hot chili. So you don't want to put too much in the dish, otherwise it ruins it. And that's kind of my view on tech.
I like that analogy. It's a good one. Yeah, I think, as we've seen with the advent of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and proof of work, the technology sometimes innovates faster than society and regulators can keep up. So you kind of get this immediate burst into the system, which is sort of like an over-injection of that technology before things start to settle down and simmer, and it kind of settles into its sort of natural flow. And I think we'll probably have something similar with metaverse and VR tech. I think there'll be sort of an initial boom and an ecosystem of developers and builders that are all out raising money from VCs and building these incredible ideas. And then, you know, we'll sort of hit the top of that bubble, and then it will settle into something much more organic. But it'll be interesting to watch.
So just to maybe close up, would be good to just sort of discuss how we think some of these big these huge tech companies like Google and Facebook and Twitter, how they could integrate Web3 and give people control over their data. Firstly, do we think that will happen? And secondly, I wonder what that transition will be, because I'm not sure I know the answer to this completely, but I have some ideas.
It doesn't seem to be in line with Facebook's business model. So giving users data sovereignty would make it very difficult for Facebook to achieve revenue in the way that they do. Of course, their whole business model is built around selling advertising that is personalized for you. And they sell that data back to advertisers via their ad platform. And they don't give them access to, you know, the whole 600-point profile of an individual user, but they do allow you to tailor advertising to a particular demographic. So I think if Facebook were to give their users ownership over their information, they would then need to get permission to use that information to sell ads. Do I think that the majority of Facebook users would want that? I think probably not. So I'm not sure how Facebook moves to that kind of model. I think what they're doing now with their long-term vision and focusing on metaverse technology and VR is probably the right move for them. And I think there are clever ways to build decentralization into that builds trust. But I don't think you could retrospectively do that with the Facebook platform now, in my view.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with a lot of that. Yeah.
Same with Google. I think, you know, Google is also a data company. They monetize people's data. And actually Web3 is meant to be the antidote to these kind of big tech giants.
Yeah. I mean, it just means that anybody with a certain amount of power in the world can access your information and data because they can subpoena a centralized data company.
Exactly.
Like Google. So
it's an interesting one, isn't it? You don't want to go too sort of conspiracy-esque
maybe we'll
with
do
it.
another episode on that because there's so much to unpack there. So sort of, I guess my closing remark is, how does this fit into your informed decisions about crypto and whether you're buying cryptos? And I always look at it like this, is I look at all the different layer one blockchains as highways. And I look at what's being built on those highways as cars or trucks. And the more people that are driving cars and trucks on those highways, probably the better. And the better quality the highway and the more efficient it is and the faster it is, the better. So I think there's a lot of layer ones out there that people are building on, and we've mentioned some of them on the show. So that's kind of our strategy, really, is looking at those platforms that people are going to be building on, and that you know, the foundations of these blockchains are incentivizing and helping those builders through offering development support and or grants. And I think that's a really smart way of looking at things, even if I do say so myself.
It is. I'm actually just going to make a recommendation to our listeners. This is something that I'm reading at the moment, and it's a book called The Genius of Algorand. There are obviously other good layer one blockchains out there, but this is a book by Anthony Scaramucci that talks about not just Algorand, but, you know, other cryptocurrencies and other blockchains, and it's about their sort of mission as a company and where they see decentralized applications going in future. It's quite a straightforward book. It's sort of written as an interview, but they talk about gaming. They talk about the work from home problem. So yeah, well worth a read.
That's amazing. I didn't know there was a book about it. I know you said you were reading about Algorand, because Well, we have them. We have them on the show.
We do.
Later this month. I think it'll end up airing the start of October. But we're going to be talking about their partnership with FIFA and some of the other things that they're doing. So that's going to be a huge interview. And I've done some Twitter Spaces with the Algorand community. I mean, look, there's plenty of other tokens and blockchains out there to look at, but I honestly think Algorand is a bit of a standout. It's one that we're accumulating. So
not financial advice.
Definitely not financial advice. So
Great.
I hope this has been useful. I hope you now understand Web3 a little bit more, because it's important. If you're in the crypto space, you really need to understand why this thing's happening and what the potential is. I think everyone's underestimating. I put a tweet out the other day that everyone's underestimating Bitcoin. I think so much more will be built and used on that. And I think the same for good quality layer ones as well. I think our minds will be blown if we were able to look 10 years into the future. We'll be like, oh my God, that's incredible. And generally we're not always great at predicting things, but you can kind of look at macro trends from previous technology cycles. So I'm excited.
Me too. Yeah, I really am. I'm excited by the potential for this technology, and it's a difficult thing to be excited when the majority of the market isn't. And I know it sort of seems contrary to what you should be doing, but this is why we keep making this show. This is why we're still, researching and putting out content and bringing on great guests, because we believe that now is the time to double down on building, double down on the great projects that are out there, and a good time to be sort of building your portfolio ready for the inevitable wave that's coming.
The face melter, whenever that comes.
Whenever it comes.
When the tourists have left, us lot will be sticking around. So if you are listening, congratulations.
Yeah, one of the few.
And we'll catch you again soon.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. It would mean the world to us if you could leave a review wherever you're listening. This really does help and allows other people to find us online. You can keep up to date with new releases of the podcast by subscribing and following us on Twitter or Instagram for the latest crypto-related news. Information provided by Cryptopulse via this podcast, website, social media channels, and any other medium does not constitute financial advice, investment recommendations, or any other type of advice whatsoever. The Cryptopulse team are not professional financial advisors. Trading and purchasing cryptocurrencies do carry risks, and anybody wishing to partake in such activities should seek professional advice.